Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin in just a second and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. The webinar will begin shortly. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last 20 to 30 minutes to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And we are live streaming this session on our Facebook Live page as well. In addition, we will be posting all resources linked in the chat on our Clip account. So please feel free to create a free account if you haven't yet done so. And finally, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars, including sessions in this 3 p.m. Eastern time slot and frequent sessions in the earlier 12:30 time slot as well. Next week, we will have the chance to learn about engaging and effective summer strategies from partners in San Mateo, California, and the 12:30 Eastern time Crucible of Practice session, followed by an exploration of the power and potential of family resource centers to support families and communities, especially rural communities. The following week, we will include a funder-to-funder conversation on May 18th with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative entitled Utilizing Learning Science to Reach Every Reader. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. Joining you now is Sarah Torian, a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays conversation, Technology to Accelerate Learning, Tech-Enabled Solutions to Address Learning Loss. Today's session is the second in a new series of learning conversations co-sponsored by the Overdeck Foundation and designed to bring information, ideas, and innovations to help all of us in the GLR network and beyond as we work to advance early school success. This past year has truly underscored the power and potential of technology to support student learning. When schools across the country were forced to close their doors in order to protect the safety and health of students, staff, and communities, education technology and tech-enabled curricula provided a much-needed educational lifeline to students, their families, and their teachers. But even so, the significant loss of in-person instructional time that many children experience and continue to experience over the past 14 months, coupled with an equitable access to connectivity and devices needed to support remote learning, has resulted in significant learning loss for many children, especially children in economically challenged families, despite, and I want to be very clear about this, despite the Herculean and amazing efforts on the parts of those students, their families, their educators, and their school leaders. This learning loss has further widened the achievement gap that we have all been working to close for so many years. Now, as greater numbers of students transition back to in-person learning, the technology that helped to limit learning loss over the past year can be a powerful and cost-effective tool as GLR communities and partners work to accelerate learning now and in the future. So today's conversation will lift up 4 tech-enabled solutions and explore how they might be deployed as a part of efforts to accelerate learning and close those achievement gaps. And to begin that conversation, I am incredibly honored to welcome and introduce our moderator for today, Ipek Fakir. Ipek is an Associate Program Officer at Overdeck Family Foundation, where she's responsible for shaping the innovative schools portfolio strategy and supporting grantee organizations within that portfolio. Prior to joining the Overdeck Family Foundation, Ipek worked as a consultant and researcher, providing impact and cost analyses to investors, schools, and ed tech companies. Welcome, Ipek. Thank you so much for all of your leadership and help in planning today's conversation and for joining us now to moderate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm thrilled to be together with you all today with all of our panelists that I'll introduce shortly and with everyone joining us live today. I'm excited to discuss technology-driven educational solutions and the role they play in accelerating learning, as you mentioned. At Overdeck Family Foundation, we believe that high quality, evidence-based, and tech-enabled solutions are critical to setting students and teachers up for success, especially when designed with students and their needs in mind. These solutions could accelerate learning for all students, specifically ones who've been historically left behind, and perhaps do so in a more cost-effective way than ever before. That's why, as a foundation, we support the continued growth and innovation of tech-enabled solutions for pre-K through 8 students across different content areas. And over the last year, especially, as you all know, the growth of digital solutions has been nothing short of stunning. Going forward, districts are predicted to spend at least 15% less on print materials and more than 6-fold on digital curriculum. Yet, we also know that not all tech is created equal, making it harder than ever before for schools and districts to know which products to offer that provide the best experience and outcomes for their students. So as a foundation, we prioritize investments in research-based and rigorously evaluated platforms that offer a full suite of services. This includes standards-aligned and engaging curriculum, teacher support, data assessment, and personalization. And it's mostly because we believe these are most likely to benefit students and teachers with the potential to measurably accelerate unfinished learning and teaching at the same time. Our goal is to have these solutions continue to improve and scale, but also at the same time improve evidence-based decision-making and edtech purchasing overall, so that the programs that do this have the chance to impact as many students as possible. That's why I'm so excited for today's conversation with 4 amazing leaders in the tech-enabled curricula and solution space. We'll use our time together to discuss a lot of exciting topics, including how digital solutions can aid student progress, what districts should look for when choosing curricula, and what's needed going forward to provide flexibility, acceleration, and support for students and teachers beyond the pandemic. With that, I'm honored to welcome and introduce today's panel of leaders in this work. I'll start with Michelle. Michelle Brown is the founder and CEO of CommonLit, an award-winning nonprofit education technology organization dedicated to closing persistent opportunity gaps in literacy education. Under Michelle's leadership, CommonLit has become a robust, free online reading program that's been accessed in 75% of American public schools. Prior to starting CommonLit, Michelle was a classroom teacher. She has taught in urban and rural environments and at the university level. We're so excited to have you, Michelle. Next up is Nina Hendershot. Nina is Chief Marketing Officer at CERN, the nonprofit educational organization behind CERN Math, the top-rated math learning platform used by 1 in 4 elementary students nationwide. CERN Math is the only K-5 EdReports greenlit curriculum that includes an aligned digital component. And before joining CERN, Nina led customer experience and marketing for companies in the financial technology space and spent nearly a decade at Bain & Company. We're excited to have you, Nina. Next up is Dr. Claudia Miner. She is the co-founder of Waterford Upstart, a home-based program that combines technology-delivered curriculum and a strong parent engagement component to prepare children for kindergarten. Waterford Upstart has been piloted in 29 states and served more than 100,000 children. Thank you for joining us, Claudia. And last but not least, Karen Wu leads Mind Research Institute's social impact team, which is responsible for the organization's philanthropic partnerships with corporations, foundations, and individuals. Over 1.6 million students and their teachers are benefiting from SD Math, Mind's signature pre-K through 8 visual instructional program that leverages the brain's innate spatial temporal reasoning ability to solve math problems. Prior to joining Mind, Karen spent more than 20 years in leadership roles in a variety of sectors, including education, video games, and nonprofits. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'll just go ahead and kick off our discussion. I'd love to start by going around the virtual room and have each of our panelists, take a few minutes to introduce the work that you do, especially for those of who are joining us that may not be familiar with each of your programs. Let's start with a short overview of your product or solution. How about we start with Michelle in CommonLit?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Michelle Brown, the founder and CEO of CommonLit. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. And we are best known for operating CommonLit.org, which has become a go-to resource for educators, particularly English language arts teachers, also social studies teachers and science teachers who are looking for a text that is worthy of students' time and attention. We also operate CommonLit Espanol, which has become a core staple to support Spanish immersion classrooms in the US. And it's also now become adopted worldwide with a growing audience in Latin America as well. So that's CommonLit. Let me show you a bit about the platform. So this is just a preview of some of the content that we have on CommonLit. So one of the great things is that we have news articles, poems, short stories, historical documents that are on this really easy to use and completely free platform for teachers. So this is just some of our featured texts. We have over 2,000 in English and Spanish for grades 3 to 12. Okay, the cool thing about CommonLit is that it is a really interactive experience for students. So our theory is that kids really need to be grappling with the language of text and topics. And so we offer highlight and annotation tools that are sort of like Google Docs style. Another great feature is that teachers can see what students write on the platform as well, which you can imagine during remote learning was just like a really game-changing tool. Let me show you a few more things. Yep. So we also offer read aloud and translation, and over 30 different languages are supported. And then we also have a feature that we developed called guided reading mode, which chunks up difficult, complex text for students, and then asks text-dependent comprehension questions as students move through the text. And you can see here on the platform that as students move through it, they get instant feedback. This is a feature that is great for differentiation because teachers can turn it on or off for individual students or groups of students. And then finally, it's just a really multimedia rich experience. So we have wonderful videos and wonderful content, again, that's worthy of our students' time and attention. So just to give you a scope of CommonLit's reach, since we started the organization back in 2014, it has grown tremendously. So today we have over 20 million teachers and students who have registered for a CommonLit account. And so that means that during the pandemic, we had a real kind of ear to the ground as far as what was going on in classrooms. And then in addition to the program that I demoed earlier, we also offer other tools that support a coherent sort of wraparound program. So in addition to the supplemental resources, we offer high quality full year curriculum. So all the materials that students need for every day of instruction for grades 6 to 10. We offer growth assessments that are affordable, also school-wide data tracking and teacher professional learning. So that's CommonLit, and thank you again. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Miner, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about Waterford Upstart. So Waterford Upstart is an in-home kindergarten readiness program that uses technology supported by parents. Our goal is to form a partnership with parents and caregivers to get children ready for success in school. The program delivers an individualized curriculum in reading, math, and science, but our emphasis is always first on reading. We support social and emotional learning through in-program modeling and offline activities, and we provide computers and internet if the home doesn't have them, so we can help end the tech gap as well as the achievement gap. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about where Upstart fits. First of all, it's important for me to say that we are not intended to replace any early childhood education effort or program. We want to improve access to early childhood education, particularly in instances where transportation makes it difficult to get to site-based programs and services, where families choose not to send their children to site-based preschool programs, and we all know that the law doesn't require them to do so, and also where children are waitlisted for site-based programs. Next slide talks a little bit about our parent support and family engagement model. Each family or caregiver is assigned a coach. We are with the family every step of the way through the program. Support is provided in any language the family needs, and it's very proactive support. We do that through contact, including written materials, in-person and online training, emails, text, and push messages with offline activities, and of course, through motivational phone calls. The next slide shows where we've been and where we're going this year, this summer, and next fall. And the next slide, I want to actually make an ask of all of you. I'd like to put in a plug for our newest variation of Upstart, the Summer Learning Path, which is an abbreviated Upstart program for 3 months of summer learning. Last summer, we did the program in 9 states and with the Navajo Nation, and we served 13,500 children. 77% were under 200% of poverty, and 86% achieved kindergarten readiness on post-program assessment. There's still time to register, and we have openings available in Massachusetts, Missouri, Virginia, Washington State, Colorado, and Maryland. There's no cost to you or to your families. The registration information is going to be in chat along with my contact information if you'd like to reach out later. And I want you to know we're very serious about wanting to help your kids, but we need to move pretty quickly because summer is almost here. So that's my introduction. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Karen Wu with Mind Research Institute and SD Math. And I will do a quick introduction of our organization. Mine started about 24 years ago with 3 scientists out of the University of California in Irvine. And their quest was to figure out how to teach the way that the brain learns. They were all neuroscientists. Our mission is really simple, to ensure that all students are mathematically equipped to solve the world's most challenging problems. So let's talk about SD Math in the next slide. So one of the neuroscientists, Dr. Matthew Peterson, struggled with dyslexia growing up. He did a great TED Talk about it. With degrees in biology, engineering, and a PhD in neuroscience, I think by age 22 or so, Dr. Peterson created SD Math, a pre-K through 8 visual instructional program that leverages the brain's innate spatial-temporal reasoning ability to solve mathematical problems. So this unique patented approach provides students with equitable access to learning through challenging puzzles, non-routine problem solving, and that really important informative feedback that Michelle just talked about. Our program is all about students building a deep conceptual understanding and schools seeing not only results, but a culture change when it comes to learning. Today, more than 1.6 million students are using SD Math, over 7,000 schools across the country, and 70% of those students are from traditionally underserved backgrounds, and 2/3 are considered low income. For extra credit, if you know the name of the penguin crossing the screen there, put it in the chat. Next slide, please. So SD Math was designed from the get-go to be accessible for all types of learners. Through several studies over the years, it's proven to make an impact for all student groups. In addition, a recent study led by Dr. Taya Rutherford and published in the Journal of Research of Technology in Education showed that SD Math increases student self-belief, which leads to a more productive struggle and growth mindset. In the next slide, we also want to highlight the fact that in addition to in-classroom implementation, SD Math is also available to families through its homeschool version. Studies have shown that along with behavioral attributes such as attention span and of course reading, readiness in math has a very significant impact in later academic achievement. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we provided free access to all versions of SD Math. The demand from families was so big that with the support of donors, we decided to continue to offer our homeschool version free of charge through this next school year. Next, please. And as a nonprofit organization, Mind has been partnering with amazing corporations and family foundations, not only to expand the reach of SD Math, but also to continue to develop new products and services to meet the needs of students, educators, and parents all across the country. We're super grateful for the support of the Overdeck Family Foundation and to be invited to be a part of this important conversation. I will pass it to Nina now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nina, and I am delighted to be here today to share a little bit more about CERN and be part of this really important discussion to explore how technology can support learning acceleration and be part of the solution for an equitable recovery. CERN is a nonprofit founded on the belief that all kids are math kids and every student can love learning math. Our math platform is used by 1 out of every 4 elementary students nationwide and includes instructional materials including daily lesson plans for teachers and adaptive software-based digital math lessons for kids. Our curriculum is greenlit by EdReports, including our digital materials, and our program is designed to be flexible to the needs of the communities we serve. So CERN can be used as a digital companion to high-quality instructional materials, or it can be used as a full core curriculum. On the next slide, as we think about learning acceleration, What's really unique about CERN is that our digital math lessons provide multiple layers of support, all built into grade appropriate learning. So kids can really catch up and move forward at the same time. As kids work through grade level math lessons, they learn with concrete and pictorial representation. We're based on the CPA pedagogical framework, and they use virtual manipulatives that help kids really make sense of the math. As kids learn, there's adaptive just-in-time scaffolding. And so we have an embedded daily diagnostic that assesses each student's understanding and automatically launches support just when kids need it. We know that kids don't all master every concept from prior grades, and our materials do not assume they do. And this is one of the most important parts of CERN compared to kind of other things that we see in the market. And other intervention programs, we're continually assessing and diagnosing and giving kids the boosts they need, all built into grade level learning. And all of that's built on the almost 8 billion problems that have been completed on our platform to date. If kids need more support beyond our grade level lessons, we've been working on this year to provide teachers with precise, personalized recommendations for intervention lessons. Our intervention lessons are specifically tailored to support learning recovery, and teachers get those notifications real time in our platform. And then finally, we have a full K-5 and very soon to be K-8 math library, as well as interactive PD modules and robust reporting for every student. It just helps teachers plan really targeted learning paths for each one of their kids. On the next slides, we're a nonprofit or research organization, and studies show that when students complete 3 lessons a week, learning gains are equivalent to adding 180 additional instructional days to the academic year. An upcoming QED study that'll be published on our site shows similar results. The QED study is based on 140,000 3rd through 5th graders in Louisiana, and shows that schools that consistently complete digital lessons alongside teachers' instruction, a really important part of CERN is it's designed to be a complement to enhance teachers' work, exhibited 1.5 to 2.5 higher academic gains relative to schools that didn't use CERN, and achievement gains grew in line with lesson completion, and most importantly, achievement gains were highest for struggling students. And so that's just CERN in a very quick snapshot, but again, delighted to be part of this conversation and really excited to dig in.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing more about your work with us and telling us about your organizations. I'd like to kick off the discussion part of our session, and I'd like to start big with something that's top of mind for everyone. As you know, that districts and states are about to receive over 122 billion of relief funding through the American Rescue Plan. And of these funds, at least 5 to 20% will be used to address learning loss alone. And based on your work, I'm guessing each of you believe that districts should consider EdTech solutions in how they spend these dollars. But given the amount of options, how do they even choose? I'd love to hear your insights on key criteria that districts should look for. How do you help them decide? And lastly, are there specific elements you suggest they consider when choosing a digital curriculum? So let's start with Nina and Karen. I'd love to hear your thoughts from the math solution space.
Thanks, Ebek. I can start. So certainly educators have more choices than ever when it comes to technology in their classrooms. And for us at CERN, and in my view, technology is most effective and really can only be effective if it's complementing and deepening the work that teachers are doing with their kids. And so how do you then determine if EdTech is going to enhance the work of teachers? I would say there's a lot of things we could look at, but 3 that come to mind for me are, first, we can look to third-party reviews written by teachers. There's so many great organizations in our space that are doing the work of bringing teachers and educators together to do robust reviews. So EdReports is a great example. It's the leading reviewer of instructional materials based on extensive teacher reviews and assesses materials based on focus, coherence, and rigor. We see a lot of the districts that we partner with looking at EdReports first. Common Sense is another great reviewer. They are expert teacher reviewers, deeply examine digital materials with a specific focus on pedagogy, student engagement, and then support it offers to teachers. and only a few materials kind of meet their 5-star ratings. I'd say first, teacher reviews. Second, we always advise districts at CERN to look for a connection between technology and the content and the materials that teachers are teaching, so that kids are learning, particularly math, the same big idea of math, both with their teacher and with their digital tools. So if their teacher is teaching, a 4th grade unit on fractions, they're using the digital tool to deepen that understanding, not necessarily working on a different big idea of math, which can be really confusing. So we asked, are the materials aligned to what you're teaching in your classroom? Are kids learning those same big ideas? And CERN alignment is something that we think is really important, especially when it comes to impact. That's why our product is built the way it is. And then finally, I would say, so teacher reviews, alignment, and then I would say, equity as a selection criteria is critical. There are a lot of organizations in the ed tech space that have a clear for-profit motive. And everyone on this call are nonprofits and not driven by dollars. And so for us at CERN, all our materials are free and have always been free for kids and teachers. And every lesson we build is intentionally designed to be inclusive to all learners. And so districts should dive in and look at those supports for kids, like how are English language learners supported? What about kids with learning differences? Is the universal design for learning framework built into the product? Equitable, accessible, inclusive technology is really critical. And so I would say start there. Teacher reviews, alignment to the materials that teachers are teaching, and is it a product that really is designed to support all kids in an equitable and inclusive way?
I couldn't agree with Nina more. I mean, all of those points, especially on the research piece. There's so much out there. There's a lot of noise in the market. So I can only imagine how overwhelming it is for both teachers and administrators to figure out what actually works. So it's important to look beyond the marketing slicks and, ask yourself, is this research based on large scale, sample sizes, independently backed, multiple studies, not just one study, and that it demonstrates effectiveness for all students, not just a small group of students, and also multiple grade levels, because you don't want something that, hey, works great for kindergarten, 1st grade, but then it doesn't work beyond that if it, the content is actually available for all those grades. So research is really important. The second really important piece is strength of implementation. Like, what is the plan for implementation? And training is so critical for teachers. One example I love to share is our partnership with the Overdeck Foundation in Massachusetts. They came in, did a 1.5 years of vetting on the program, and then decided to invest big in implementing NST Math with really high fidelity. And over the last 3 years, we're seeing really big gains in effect size of students, just using the program more, and the more they use it, the more they're learning. So we're learning a lot through the partnership, and then taking the best practices we're learning from that throughout the entire country. And then finally, informative feedback is built into our program, but it's also important for our teachers and administrators. If the program gives you that micro level data and the macro level data so that you can make informed decisions, that's really important. It's like real-time data that informs how each student, each class, and the entire school district is doing. Yeah, those would be my recommendations of how to look at programs.
Thanks, Karen. It's super helpful to hear both your and Nina's perspectives. And I'd love to hear from Michelle, coming from the blended literacy ELA lens. Is there anything you would add?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of themes I just want to overlap on. One is in the domain of ELA, absolutely, evidence of effectiveness of the tool matters so much. And let me just be clear that it's really easy for a program to cite research and say, here was the research that informed our approach. It's another thing completely when the tool itself has gone through a rigorous evaluation, a quasi-experiment, a randomized control trial study, and specifically from a third party. I know like all of the solutions here have invested rigorously in that measurement and evaluation. And I do think like that is a key piece that, leaders, we should all be looking for and demanding much more. And not just that it has an overall effect size, but actually what are the effects are they equitable? Are we actually do the tools have special effects for students with learning disabilities and for different demographic groups? I think second is, you know, in terms of the equity focus is another big overlap. And I'll just like be more concrete about what this actually looks like from an engineering team or something like that. It would be, we at CommonLit, for example, we spend a lot of time making sure that the CommonLit platform is accessible on like a small screen, because we know that so many students like have to share their devices. And so that's an example. Whereas for like maybe another engineering team that might be an edge case or something, I think just making sure that the tool itself is like, that they're talking about equity and that it's very, very accessible to students. And then just a couple of things within the domain of English language arts that I think are just worth mentioning. One is that, you know, when we're thinking about programs that we want to adopt after a year of social isolation that students have been experiencing, I cannot underscore enough how important I think a shared classroom experience is and shared texts are for students. So I cringe to think of a student who might be going back to school after all of this time and then going back and like clicking through a screen on like a skills-based adaptive program. We want tools with maximum inclusivity, with shared experiences, with texts that are worthy and of our students' time and attention, that are representative, and also tools that I think are just keeping it simple for teachers overall. The last thing I'll mention is that in October of 2020, CommonLit actually put out a survey and 14,000 English language arts teachers responded to this survey. We were like, what do you need? What's top of mind for you? And one big theme that came across in that survey was that teachers are looking for tools that are connected to like a coherent instructional vision, and that are like not just sort of like a one-off tool or program or just another platform to log into. They really wanted like more packaged curricula or modules that they know would be highly engaging and really effective.
Super helpful. You guys all mentioned a lot of elements and criteria that district leaders, teachers, anyone can use when picking solutions. And something that I heard Karen specifically mention is how near real-time analytics and personalization, this aspect of data collection is one of the key parts of solutions like yours that are tech-driven. I'd love to hear more about this. If you can each tell us more about how your solutions have provided insights into student learning, and if there are any unique ways you've been able to utilize data in your platforms to drive student progress, specifically during COVID. Maybe this time we can start with Claudia.
Well, thank you. I think maybe we all share one use of data, and that is how it informs the personalization of our instruction. And I think at the bottom of all of this, that's the greatest thing about technology. So when we teach to mastery. So children are going to end the program in different places, but they're going to know what they've learned, and they're probably going to remember it, which is terrific. As far as the data, one thing that might be, and it's not going to be different from everyone here, but we focus a lot on putting data in the hands of the parents. And why that's important is how you portray the data. It's not that parents can't all understand graphs and charts and dashboards, et cetera. It's just that they're so busy. So make it simple for them. And the importance of the data for us is it's motivational to the parents. They want to know how the children do at the beginning and how they finish, but they also want to know how they're doing as the program moves along. And anything that's motivational to parents, we have found becomes motivational to children. because the parents are going to use it to motivate the children. So it just means that we think the parents are sort of the key to success. At the same time, we haven't forgotten the children, and we're actually doing a lot of work in our software right now to build in more acknowledgments of achievement. Now, we're not going to do dashboards for the children, but we are going to make sure that we have more progress markers and sort of mini celebrations in the software.
If I can add to Claudia's comments, and I love that she's so focused on the parents, because that parent engagement is really important. For us, our majority of our data has been over the last 20 years on teachers and administrators being able to have actionable data. And now that we have offering for parents, we're collecting that data as well. But two key things that we look at is usage and progress, because you can have access, but if you're not using the program and making progress on it, then you're really not gaining from the awesomeness of the program. So we track those things a lot, and we allow the teachers and administrators to also track those, because at the micro level, as I mentioned before, teachers need to see if students' time spent on the program is being productive, and if not, why not? Do they need to level set and tailor, the objectives more to that student? And then at the macro level, especially during the pandemic, administrators were panicking. It's like, are students actually doing homework? Are they actually using the programs that we, have? So they need to be able to see aggregate data on how much it's being used minute by minute, and how far each student and each classroom and entire grade levels are progressing on the program. Our theory of change relies on that to show, time on program, progress on program means actual achievement in mathematical gains. So those two things are really important, and I think they'll continue to be important beyond, the pandemic, because it's so informative to decision makers.
I completely agree with that. I think the idea of showing, again, that usage and progress is something that digital tools offer a purview into that obviously a traditional curriculum cannot. Another area that digital tools can use data to better impact student learning is compared to a traditional print or even a traditional PDF curriculum, is that we can see on our platforms how where students are struggling and where they might need more support, and then use that data to then make a better product. And so that's a lot of our work at CERN. We've had billions of problems completed to date, and we look at that data to see, where do we need to add more supports to improve our curriculums? One example is in third grade. Third grade standards assume that kids deeply understood addition and subtraction of multi-digit numbers from second grade. And when we look at our data, we know that that's simply not the case, and kids need more support there. And so at CERN, we use our data to analyze that, and we built an adaptive fluency exercise into our third grade lessons that directly addresses that base 10 and place value understanding from second grade, and build fluency with addition and subtraction strategies within the context of a student's third grade learning, so that kids can really catch up and move forward at the same time. That visibility would not be possible if were it being a software-based program that has a vast data set. One other thing that I think is really interesting even from CERN is, in the pandemic, we've now released our data publicly for the first time. And part of that reason was, to Karen's point, we saw really devastating shifts in usage and progress by student income groups and geography. And so for the first time in 4 years, since we began tracking our data and using it internally to improve our lessons, we saw that there was distinct differences. And when our data started to change dramatically, we shared our data with Opportunity Insights, which is a research organization from Brown and Harvard, so that our data could be used to provide visibility into how the pandemic was impacting equitable math learning, and really how policy choices can help shift the trend. And the data shows that learning recovery has simply not been equitable. And for, if you look at the data, which I can share, it's tracktherecovery.org. For every single instructional week of the pandemic, we've seen kids in lower income schools miss learning, like to Karen's point, misusage and miss progress relative to their pre-pandemic baseline. And in contrast, we've seen kids from higher income backgrounds not miss learning. And so our hope is that, again, with all this data, that we can share our data and present a record as like a nationally representative metric of what has happened and what is still happening to low income students, so that we can just have that visibility as a field and better make policy decisions.
I think just building off of what Nina said, she mentioned this topic of how like the unique benefit of curricula on a digital platform and how our organizations can use the data that we collect in order to drive continuous improvement. Just another way to say this or visualize this within the domain of English language arts is like, before we had a textbook. And you might get a new edition of a textbook that gets shipped every 5 or 7 years, and it gets improved. But at CommonLit and at all of our organizations, we can actually look at analytics and go, oh my gosh, this distractor B is like too distracting. It's written incorrectly. Let's switch it. And so our program can just get better and better and better. So that's just top of mind for me. And then another way to think about it is in terms of analytics. I would say for English language arts teachers, I think about it 3 ways. One is formative feedback. So like that tells the teacher, did students learn what I taught that day? And that's like aimed at the teacher. Second are summative assessments, like how are my students doing and growing compared to other students at the same grade level. And I can't underscore enough how important it is that in terms of selecting products that have that like summative piece or like interims or benchmarks, look at their field testing practices. Make sure that they're not cutting corners with their assessments, especially if these assessments are being used for big decisions or placing students into different groups. I think it's just so important that the assessments are valid, and especially that if we, to the extent that we are sending that information back home to families, that it's information that they could really rely on and make decisions based off of. And then Claudia mentioned, this idea of data analytics that could be motivating. And I just love that so much. I think, one litmus test of that is, if you're looking at a platform and it's like, you're not motivated by the data, like that you have a 75% on RL.3, like if you're not motivated by that, I'm not motivated by that. Like, who cares? That means it's probably not great data, or maybe you should look at some other platform that might be more actionable and that has like where the data is packaged in a way that has like a strong message.
I'd like to add that we received some very interesting informal data just from our parents. And I can tell you, I don't think there was a family we served that wasn't affected by COVID. We were working in Las Vegas when it closed down, and I would say 80% of our parents lost their jobs. And so it was very important for our coaches to take this kind of data into consideration as we supported the families as well.
Yeah, Claudia, thanks for that addition. It's great to start with parents and come back to parents as we talked about data and analytics, and something that's actually very much related to what you all just shared with us is this idea, this need around learning acceleration. And as we all know, last March, schools closed to keep students, staff, families safe. And a lot of school students are just now, after a year, returning to in-person learning. And this lost instructional time, coupled with inequitable access to remote learning opportunities, has caused many children to fall behind and have significantly increased achievement gaps. I'd love to hear more about what you believe the role of your product is or should be in responding to this challenge and accelerating student learning. Karen, should we start with you?
Sure. I love this question and topic because it's so front of mind for everyone. You know, I'm sure everybody here remembers back in April, the NWEA came out with a report saying COVID is going to last, you know, probably a whole year, which back then it was just like, no, that's not possible. And it did. And then not only that, you know, reading level is going to fall behind, math levels are going to fall way behind. So there was definitely the sky's falling, you know, feeling even back then. And now it's really front of mind for all educators that we're working with. The good news is, as you mentioned, time was lost. Like kids are just as smart as they were at the beginning of the pandemic. Like we didn't lose like kids, you know, and their abilities. Just like Nina said, they're all math kids, you know, they're all reading kids. They all have the potential, and that potential is still there. So as far as the students go and the teachers who are wonderful, the sky is not falling. Time is what the challenge is. We need to recover that time. One of the biggest misconceptions is that, oh, they're a grade level behind, so let's just put them in a whole grade level behind. If they're in third grade, let's put them in second grade content. But there's plenty of studies showing that that's actually counterproductive, that students who are put in grade levels, you know, behind don't actually ever catch up. And unfortunately, the students that get put behind are disproportionately students of color from, you know, backgrounds that are just more disadvantaged. And it could be a bias on the educator's, you know, point of view. It could be just, you know, as an aggregate that this is happening, but it's not effective to put students behind. So a lot of the programs, you know, that we're talking about today are mastery based, are really figuring out how students, you know, can catch up on their own. They just need more time. So we're working with teachers all across the country to figure out how to get that time. And as Michelle mentioned, because it's a technology-based program, we can also go back to our own program and see where we can recover time. You know, was there too many clicks, you know, to get from here to here? You know, is this program not as effective in, you know, teaching this objective as another game might be? So we're able to be super agile and do the research and then quickly study the feedback from teachers and students on how effective, you know, that particular puzzle or objective was. I think that overall, if we really partner with our educators, they know the solution. And of course, it's easier said than done, you know, we just need more time. But there's very innovative teachers out there and parents who are willing to work with their children at home as well. So I think part of our role is to make parents and teachers realize that the sky is not falling. Yes, this is a very serious moment in history that we're facing, but we're partners with them to figure out how to get the students to achieve the progress that they need.
I feel like I want to clap to that.
Oh, thanks, Nina.
I completely agree. And also the idea, just like underscoring the idea that, you know, students are brilliant, and this isn't a student problem we're facing. It's an adult decision problem, an adult policy problem. And how can we as grownups make the right policy decisions and the right decisions around instructional materials and intervention structures and extended time programs to help ensure an equitable recovery for kids. You know, I think that for us, we think about a set of acceleration strategies that have to be put in place. We spend a lot of time at CERN thinking about how we can both catch kids up in their grade level learning, because there is grade level learning, there is learning that needs to be caught up. Like there has been unfinished learning, and there's always been unfinished learning, but the pandemic has certainly exacerbated that. There's just been so many learning disruptions, so many starts and stops, that it's not lost learning, it's not missed learning, but it certainly is unfinished learning. We need to both catch kids up and move them forward at the same time. And we need to underpin all of that and still giving all kids the opportunity to learn grade level and grade appropriate ideas. I find myself often coming back to like TNTP's opportunity myth that we have to make sure that we're still giving grade appropriate content to all kids, and not going back and just focusing on mastering the basics before kids can engage in more complex problem solving. I think that's particularly one thing we've been thinking a lot about at CERN is how that works in a world where we might be taking as a field remediation strategies as opposed to acceleration strategies, and kind of what does remediation versus acceleration look like? Like, how do we move forward? And so there's a lot of research out there on strategies that can support teachers with kind of integrating unfinished learning into the context of new learning so that kids can make connections and accelerate. We've all heard about an extended time program of using tutoring. That is a great, I think that's really interesting to see how that will play out. Two strategies that we at CERN are really focused on are, one, just providing materials that allow for just-in-time purposeful interventions when the need arises and is clearly demonstrated, so that when kids are working through content, teachers have the visibility to see kind of what Michelle was talking to, those formative assessments to see, are kids struggling with this content? Are they understanding this content? Are they demonstrating understanding? And then and only then providing the intervention just in time, not necessarily front loading a lot of remediation content, because then we're just going to get stuck in this trap of we spend so much time remediating that kids then don't get the opportunity to engage with grade appropriate content. And I think as technology, we can provide teachers with really helpful tools to allow for that and to support their work in providing that, just in time, essentially tier 1 intervention and tier 1 differentiation. A second thing that we're really focused on at CERN is really thinking about an acceleration strategy around coherent intervention. Michelle had mentioned earlier this idea of a coherent instructional vision. And I think that is more important now than ever, especially as we think about these extended time programs. How do we make sure that the core block, whether it's a core math block or core ELA block, is coherently connected to what kids are doing in that intervention time? Because we know as adults, if you're learning one big idea and you're kind of working on geometry with your teacher, and then during a intervention block, you're going back and doing, addition and subtraction strategies, that can just be really confusing. And that's not going to help us efficiently use our time to catch up. And so how do we, as a field, I think it's really important to choose tools that allow for that coherent intervention and coherent alignment between all these extended time programs. At CERN, that's what we're focused on doing. And so we have this, we have embedded adaptive support to allow for that just-in-time kind of purposeful intervention. And then all our materials are coherently aligned to what teachers are teaching. So if a teacher's teaching something in the core math block, CERN can be used to coherently intervene. But I think this idea of just-in-time and coherence is really important, particularly as we just have to support teachers with the tools and the resources to help them accelerate and not remediate.
Yeah, so the question is, if we had to make a bet, what would be the acceleration strategies that we would select, or that should be top of mind right now? And I can speak to within the domain of ELA. So for me, there are two things that I would put my bet on. One is that there's a lot of research about knowledge building and content-rich instruction for students. So we know that in the domain of ELA, kids, they need to have that background knowledge. They need to be in a language-rich classroom environment where they're talking about academic content a lot. And that going, with this skills forward approach may not be the best. So I would put my bet there. Second is, we know from research and also from our own internal research and observation of nearly 300 hours of classroom instruction, that one of the biggest predictors of academic gains for students is the number of minutes that students actually spend reading and actually spend writing. It's just it seems so simple, but it's very clear that teachers have a tendency, especially when they're doing direct instruction, to fill those precious instructional minutes with a lot of filler time that doesn't always advance the learning. So for me, I would just say, like, whatever intervention we choose, let's just get kids those knowledge building practice minutes. And then in terms of what CommonLit's role is in all of this, I'll use this time to just give one plug, which is that on June 1st, we'll be launching CommonLit 360, a comprehensive grade level curriculum for grades 6 to 10 that's knowledge rich. So check it out if you haven't already.
Well, I'm going to speak for the youngest learners for a minute and say we actually have a different problem, I think, and that is they don't have a lot of learning loss. What we're trying to solve is the access issue. When you come and talk to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, I don't think you need to quote any of the statistics about how important early literacy is in terms of academic struggles and even job earnings, you know, the whole range of things. So we see school readiness and jumping the barriers to access to school readiness as some of the most important levers for increasing social justice, even reducing intergenerational poverty and launching children to lifelong learning. So they get to school as Upstart graduates, and they aren't immediately, given the tag below benchmark, not proficient or failing. Instead, they're a graduate. They're an early reader. They know they can learn, and that becomes so important for everything they're going to do.
That's so true. Thanks, Claudia, and thanks all of you for sharing that. I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, so I'm going to ask my last question, and I want to make sure that we close this part of the webinar with a positive note, and just want to hear about, as you look forward, what are you excited about? It's been a challenging year plus, but we've learned a lot, so I'd love to hear each of your thoughts looking forward. And we can start.
Well, I'll start.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'll start, and this won't be a surprise after everything else I said today. Parents make me very optimistic. I think sometimes we think today it's anachronistic to say parents want the best for their children, but I think it's more relevant than ever. I think what they need and they also want is tools so they know how to help their children. And our experience has been once you give them that, they just perform beautifully in behalf of their children and will do anything they can to help. So that makes me very optimistic.
I can jump in and share what is making mine and SD Math optimistic. So prior to the pandemic, our conversations, some were at the district level, some were school by school. The pandemic really pushed state agencies and district administrators to jump in to figure out how to help each schools within their district make good program decisions. So since the pandemic, we've had a lot more partnerships with districts and even entire states. So like with Texas, we have a partnership with the TA now, providing free access to SD Math for the entire state. So that makes me really optimistic, that policymakers and district level administrators are really looking for the right solutions for their teachers and students. Michelle?
Yeah, I would say just overall, I think that there's a big willingness. I think this tested everyone, the pandemic. And I think that so many of our tools and programs and schools have been pretty honest and about the ways that it was a real face plant. And I think that what I'm hearing is like, what makes me optimistic is that I think there's a lot of humility now to say, and a lot of willingness to say, let's actually take a bigger risk and have like invest in bigger changes that might be more enduring and more long-term. And let's actually face these inequities that we're seeing head on and talk about them. So I'm excited too about new money too, education.
Yeah, I would build on that. I also think it's really energizing for me to see that the federal government and states are now being offered more funding to give to local districts and local education agencies through the American Rescue Plan and through new ESSER funding to put to work for our students in the most need. The pandemic has certainly shined a light on issues that have been existing for a long time. And I feel like now, kind of moving forward, the funding and the momentum is there to actually truly move forward and rebuild our education system in a way that it's more equitable for all kids. And that's really inspiring. It's what kind of fuels me to continue spending my days doing this. And so it's exciting to see how districts will use that funding to support teachers and support the kids in most need.
Big cheers for that, Nina.
It's so true. And thank you, all of you. It's, I know a lot of work is ahead of us, but it's great to be working on it with you all. And I really appreciate you sharing your insights with everyone who's live and with us today. And I'll just go to, we got so many Q&As. So I'll start with one that came from Nathan Levin. He said that, as you all mentioned and highlighted the importance of tools working in tandem with students and teachers, can you share more about specific implementation details about how teachers are using your platforms? And this is a question to all of you, so feel free to share thoughts on just.
Yeah, I might combine that. I'll partially answer the question, but I'll also combine it with another question that I saw, that I glanced on the list.
Great.
That had to do with whether our programs can also be used at home and if we have summer solutions. For ST Math, the answer is yes to both. So we actually have a summer offering right now, and we're actively encouraging districts to adopt. And at the same time, we are working with educators to learn how to assign ST Math as homework, because that was actually part of the reason why it took off so rapidly during the pandemic, was that accessibility from home was already there. We just had to remind parents and teachers that the access was already there, because they were enjoying using it in the classroom, but had not extended, how they could use that at home. So our educational consultants in the field are working actively with teachers to implement best practices on, which objectives to use in the classroom and which objectives and puzzles to assign for homework, so that they can continue to gain time.
This question reminds me a lot of questions that we got from educators during the pandemic as well. I remember kind of a day in November where someone sent me their schedule of their their block of the day, and was like, when, it's already full. When should we do CERN? Like, when do you fit in? And I think that it's such an important question to get to that grain size level of detail within literally in the minutes of the day. For CERN, we really think about a lot of math blocks have some element of independent learning time, whether that's kind of a paper and pencil worksheet, whether that's independent practice on your own. That's where we really see, at least in the educators that we work with, that's where we see CERN coming in. I'm doing 30 minutes a day of a digital math lesson, again, intended to complement a teacher's instruction. And so, way before the pandemic started, we saw teachers using a rotational model where one lesson of the day, the teacher would teach it, and for 45 minutes with fluency and concept development, and then kids would do that same concept on CERN, and then they would do an exit ticket or a formative assessment. As the pandemic has happened, that kind of independent time came in different places, like Karen saying, whether it's in homework or a different time. But I think it's such an important question to think about, what is literally the grain size of when do we slot these programs in, given there is not infinite time and there's a finite time, and there's also ELA and science and art and PE and social. There's just so much that needs to be covered. But I would say like look to the independent time that kids are using, and like a worksheet cannot offer kids with real-time feedback, even the best worksheet. And that's where a digital tool can really serve to accelerate learning by giving kids that real-time feedback and kind of built-in help that they need.
Yeah, it's true. It's like every minute counts. Michelle, did you want to add something? And then we'll switch to the next one.
No, just the one thing I'll mention is that CommonLit does have a parent login. So for folks that might be looking at something that can be used at home, check that out.
Yeah, there's a lot coming in, like I mentioned. So I'll just read one of the questions we got earlier. And Michelle, maybe you can actually start by speaking to this, since this came up earlier during your intro. How do you get rigorous third-party evaluation funded, or how do you as an organization know you're ready to be evaluated that rigorously? It's a great question.
Yeah, so we had a federal grant, and I know some other folks here have gotten their evaluations funded through a federal grant. Ours is through a program called Innovative Approaches to Literacy. We've now gotten that federal funding twice. And then how do you know your organization is ready? At least for CommonLit, I think it's part of your, like from day one, we've been doing rigorous evaluation. So CommonLit was actually, fun fact, it was my thesis in graduate school, which started as a quasi-experiment with 222 students. So this whole measurement and evaluation journey has been happening since day one.
Yeah, at Upstart, we have random control trials funded by an I3 grant and an EIR scale-up grant, and also private donors, because one of the things, we are seeing, and I see heads nodding, more and more donors really want to know what the impact of their funding is. And so we're happy that they want to do that. We have found when's the right time. The right time for us was when the state of Utah funded us and we got the RFP, and they said, we're assigning you an external evaluation. So don't be afraid of it. It's one of the best things that ever happened to us, actually, when we began to have the data. And it really made us not unique, no one's ever unique, but sort of stand out in the early education field, because people are hesitant to even try to assess that age group. And we've proven not only can you assess them, you should, because as Karen said, decision makers are counting on you having that data so they can make informed decisions.
For mine, I think we might be the oldest organization here. 24 years ago, like Michelle, and you guys are so smart. You just like start companies in college. I don't know how that happens, but that's what happened. Dr. Peterson was working on his thesis for his PhD in neuroscience and really wanted to study how the brain learned, and got a grant actually from initially from individual contributor. And Mind Research Institute has always been a research organization from the get-go. So we put in our website, research is our middle name, because it literally is. And I would say the time to start doing research is now, like whatever period, in the organizational development you're in, do whatever little research you can afford and, document to as big as you can, possibly do, apply for research grants, partner with universities, find what your unique value prop is for your unique program and the group that you're studying, and pitch that as the reason to study, this group. And it's important to do that, because without it, we wouldn't be the organization that we are today and wouldn't have scaled in the way that we did.
Yeah, it's, I completely agree. It doesn't have to be an RCT, always, any research. It's easier said than done, but I agree with what you all said. Maybe a related question actually is, and this is going to sound like a pop quiz question, but if you can share with us the largest effect size you've documented for any Title I cohort of students that you serve for your products.
0.42, but the kids weren't in Title I school yet because they weren't in school, but that's for the low-income kids.
I think for us, it's 0.57, and the lower their achievement at the beginning of the study, the more they achieved. So Title I or Tier 1, their achievement is actually higher than the other groups.
And if not effect size, I think you all collect data in detail. So if there's any anecdotes or anything you can share to share with our attendees, that'd be great.
I don't know off the top of my head, but all of our data is in this report that I put in the chat.
Great.
I would also share the data we're doing in a quasi-experimental design study right now that will be published later this academic year that looks at 140,000 kids in Louisiana schools. And I don't know the percent of those schools that are Title I offhand, but it is more than the majority. And that showed that when students learned with CERN 3 lessons a week, they showed 1.5 to 2.5 times the academic growth. And I'll put that also in our chat again. And I'm like messaging someone from my team of what percent of those schools and those 140,000 kids were in a Title I school, because it's a great question and really important as we focus on serving the kids most in need.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know each of you work with majority Title I schools. So I encourage everyone to go on the website and click on the links that our panelists just shared with you all to see more details. Okay, I want to go back to a question that Karen actually, I think, started talking to, but a lot of our attendees are asking questions around in-school time and its connection to out-of-school time. So I'm curious if you can share how we can adapt tech-enabled programs for the out-of-school time space in general.
Well, we're done out of school because we're done in the home, obviously. And I think the important thing there is to find ways to connect the school and the home. And one of the things we use is our Mentor app so that teachers can actually see how the children are doing and, you know, how engaged the parents are. So it's a little bit different with the preschool age population since they've never been to school, and some schools don't even know they're coming until they show up for kindergarten. But you still have to work both ways if you can, obviously.
Yeah, and I'll just add, CommonLit is primarily used in classrooms during the instructional day. But like I mentioned, we do have a parent login. And also during the summer, we did this last summer and it was really effective. We run a summer reading challenge for students in grades 3 to 12 with, you know, where students get certificates for reading. So check that out.
Yeah, I would also add on that as we think about extended time and like additional time strategies, I think summer is a really critical one that we as a field need to look to of how are we helping parents and caregivers and families, but also teachers, especially with the American Rescue Plan. A lot of that funding and ESSER funding is asking districts to put together a plan for summer school. And so, you know, how do our programs work in that? And it's like exciting to hear of all the different ways, like Karen mentioned in Texas, the work that's being done there to support kind of summer at home learning and then also summer school learning and just like all the different ways our program can be used. Because I think that tech can really offer a lot of flexibility to both teachers and families in helping kids build that foundational knowledge that they're going to need so that they can start the school year with a really strong start. And so summer to us is very critical. We've We've launched a summer program that includes 12 weeks, which I realize is longer than most summer schools, but 12 weeks of the most critical, essential math content based on student achievement partners, prioritized instructional content, and looked at that and kind of outlined daily math lessons that students can complete independently, and then lesson plans that teachers or tutors could use to supplement that learning. But I think as we think about time, we're about to embark on 3 months of time, and obviously there's social emotional learning and re-engaging in school is like paramount, but how do we actually use that time to also accelerate is a key question as well.
Yeah, I think the line between home, summer, school year, in classroom, everything has blurred so much. So the key for administrators to make sure that all the programs actually work with each other, are complementary to each other, and that the resources are readily available for parents, because they're such a big partner now of the education of their children. So during the pandemic, we realized that we needed to extend our call hours for our call center to actually answer questions from parents, and then quickly developed videos and flyers and resources on our website in Spanish, and then had to add other languages to it so that the resources were readily available for educators to pass on to the parents. Because a lot of people were like, what's this penguin? What are we doing? And, if we had the solution ready for the schools, it was easier for them to partner with the parents.
Yeah, we have found that the idea of a turnkey solution is pretty attractive to districts right now, because teachers are as worn out as parents are. So the idea of just handing something and the coach working with the family instead of the instead of the teacher having to be in a classroom, I've taken to saying you can get the child ready for school in less time than it takes to get them dressed to go to school. So that's pretty attractive this summer as people are trying to emerge, I think, including teachers.
Yeah, I know that to Karen's point and to all of your point, the lines have gotten really blurry between in school, out of school, summertime, actual time. So it does feel like technology allows for learning to happen from anytime, anywhere more easily, especially now. I want to ask, this might be our last question. It's a good one. We focus the webinar on earlier ages, and there's a question from Renee Drake on older questions. She's asking, just thinking about ninth graders and how it's going to be difficult to transition to high school for middle schoolers. Are there any tech tools for older students that any of you would recommend?
CommonLit sweet spot is, grades 6 to 10. So I think ninth graders making that transition would benefit a lot from our tool. I mentioned before, made a plug for CommonLit 360. So this is a comprehensive and free full year curriculum for grades 6 to 10. We have been, it's like rich with all sorts of materials to be used as core instruction, but then it also empowers teachers to run book clubs or independent reading, like concurrent with the core instruction, that could help add that extra time and those extra practice minutes that I was mentioning, spent reading and writing at home. So we're launching this on June 1st, and I think this could potentially be a good solution.
While not an answer that can be immediately actionable, Renee, I completely agree with you in thinking about our older learners and how we think about supporting high school students. We are actively, our number one focus at CERN on our instructional team and our curriculum team is building out 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then ultimately algebra as well. Because again, that like you were saying, those older learners, it's so critical to have a lot of technology products that can support their learning in a high quality and effective way.
I think we're actually right on time. Thank you everyone for sending amazing questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm so grateful for your time and all the work that you do. Thanks for being here with us. And we'll share a recording as you'll see in the chat.
Thank you for hosting, EPAC.
Thank you for this great conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
This was awesome.
Yes, I'd like to say ditto to what EPAC just shared. Thank you to all of our amazing panelists. It's been exciting to hear from and learn from each of you about the amazing innovations that and products that each of you are offering to kids and teachers and students and families. And thank you so much, EPAC, for bringing these folks together today and for moderating this conversation in such a beautiful way. You know, I realized actually while you were talking that today is actually Teacher Appreciation Day. So I think it is incredibly appropriate that what you've shared, I mean, each of these tools is such an amazing support to teachers and a wonderful resource for teachers in the important and powerful work that they're doing in classrooms every day, and even right now on computer screens from their homes while kids are in their homes as well. Before we close for the day, just wanted to encourage everyone who's joining us to take a quick moment, if you haven't already, and fill out the survey poll that should have popped up on your screen a while ago. It really does help us with our commitment to continuous improvement and making sure that these conversations are relevant to your work, meeting your needs, and informing your efforts to support children and families. And then also before we close, just wanted to remind you of some of the great sessions that we have coming up in the coming weeks. Next week, we'll have a chance to learn about engaging and effective summer strategies from our partners in San Mateo, California. In the 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot. That's one of our Crucible of Practice salon sessions. And that will be followed by an exploration of the power and potential of family resource centers to support families and communities, especially families living in more rural communities. So hope you'll make plans to tune in for those sessions next week. And then the following week, we'll have another one of our Funder to Funder conversations with the Chan Zuckerberg Institute, and they will be sharing information about their Reach Every Reader initiative that's bringing together researchers from Harvard Graduate School of Education, MIT, and Florida State University to create some resources and tools that can support children, families, and educators to ensure that all children achieve that critical milestone of reading proficiency by the end of 3rd grade. So I've just posted some links, registration links for those sessions in the chat box, and I hope you'll check them out and make plans to join us for more of these online learning conversations in future weeks. Until then, I hope you all have a great rest of your week. A huge thank you to all of our panelists and our moderator again today. Thank you to the Overdeck Family Foundation for helping to sponsor these sessions and plan them with us. And hope you will all stay safe, be well, and see you soon.